achieved.
So here we are, UFC Fight Night 173, August 1st, 2020, the event that I had pegged as my final prediction show. I started my channel on August 1st, 2010, John Jones versus Vladimir Matyushenko, and now 10 years later, exactly to the day, I'm opting to walk away. Now, in what capacity? As of right now, for good. Have people said to me you should come back and do pay-per-views and do other shows? Absolutely, and that's something that definitely is on my mind. I've had a very difficult time hearing all these awesome fight announcements, like Khabib and Gaethje coming up. Of course, Cormier in DC, we're going to see them as well. Izzy and Costa also lined up awesome fights, and I look at those and go, how would I break those down? You know, but I just think it's the right time for me to move on. I'll probably be active on Twitter once I take a little bit of a break. And again, I wouldn't rule out coming back in some capacity at some point to do some major, pay-per-views or major fight breakdowns. But as of right now, I'm going to take a break. I haven't missed an event in 10 years, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. And it's been time-consuming, and it's been very rewarding. And it's also times been disappointing at times. And you guys have been fantastic as viewers and supporters. All the great things you've said over the last few weeks and over the last 10 years have been much appreciated, and it's awesome, and it's been a good experience, and I've really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of people who, let's put it this way, I'm hoping that I'm going to continue to enjoy the sport as a fan and as somebody who just sits back and watches the fights and doesn't spend hours and hours and hours of prepping for a matchup, and hey, we'll see how it turns out. And there's a lot of good predictors out there, so make sure you check them out. Fight Night Picks is a channel too, guys. I've checked in on once in a while, and they seem to be doing some good work. So definitely check them out if you're looking for someone to fill the void. And again, it's very time consuming and a lot of fun. But hey, I've got a young family and all kinds of other things going on, so I definitely need to focus a little bit more there. On that note, welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 173 event, which will go down on August 1st, 2020 from the Apex Center in Las Vegas. 5 awesome main card fights, which I'll be giving you predictions for. All of my preliminary picks, as per usual, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. So please check them out. The bet pack will also be for sale one last time here August 1st, $15. You can certainly invest there. Coming off a decent showing, I went 10-5 at the last event, started 6-0. And then of all people, Jesse Ronson from not too far away from where I am picks up the upset victory, and my night kind of unwound from there. But hey, it was a good overall night, and we will certainly look to go out strong on this card. It's unfortunate Holly Holm Irene Aldana was supposed to be the main event. That was going to be a crackerjack of a fight. I was really looking forward to it, and unfortunately, obviously that isn't the case anymore. But yeah, we've got 5 really awesome fights nonetheless, and we're going to get to that first main card prediction up next. Our first main card prediction goes down in the UFC's middleweight division as the 12-2 Trevin Giles takes on the 17-5, always entertaining Kevin Holland. Currently, Kevin Holland comes in as the -200 underdog. The return on Giles is a solid +170. Now, looking at this matchup, you have a pair of interesting fighters, guys with a lot of talent, but they've had some ups and downs, and they're really still trying to get their footing inside the octagon and see where they can put themselves. Holland, I think, is a little bit further along in that process. He's 4-2 inside the UFC. He's coming off a big, impressive victory over Anthony Hernandez. Took him just 39 seconds to get him out of there. For Trevin Giles, he's 3-2 inside the octagon, coming off a split decision win over James Krause, who came in as a less than 24-hour short notice replacement. It was a fun fight. Giles getting the victory, a much-needed victory. He had to have that win for sure. Physically, Holland's 6'3". He'll be 3 inches taller than Giles. He'll also have a very sizable 7-inch reach. They are the same age. Now, they have one common opponent in their brief UFC history, at least, fighting Gerald Meerschaert, who's fighting on the undercard of this card. Giles lost via submission in a very entertaining back-and-forth bout. In a similarly entertaining fight, Holland won a split decision over GM3 in that contest. Now, both of these fighters are very capable, but again, unfortunately flawed individuals. Holland has a tendency to just fight to his opponent's style. When you look at some of his matchups, and he's had success with it, When he fought GM3, he fought him primarily on the mat, which was fought to Gerald's strength. When he fought John Phillips, a fighter who's vulnerable on the ground, he stood and banged with him for a long time. He eventually submitted him, but he stood with him just too long as far as I'm concerned. And then against Brendan Allen, another very capable grappler, he grappled with him, and it cost him. He got submitted. When you look at Giles, he's a fighter that tends to start very strong and fade and make some poor choices as well, and it has cost him a couple of fights. That being said, he did have some success earlier in his UFC career against Antonio Braganato, starting not too strongly and then rallying and finishing him. And more recently against James Krause, he got off to a rough start early but rallied and took that fight in a very demanding performance. Now, Giles has some solid boxing. He has some power in his hands. He's got 5 wins by knockout, but he has a tendency to be a little bit too tentative, and that has cost him. For Kevin Holland, he uses more of a kicking-based offense. We saw him put Hernandez down with knees to the body. He's a very creative striker. He's a little unorthodox, which gives some opponents some pause and makes things a little bit more difficult. And as I said, Giles tends to be a little bit hesitant at the best of times and passive, which can get him in trouble, can get him behind in the scorecards, and almost outworked by guys who aren't as talented or aren't as dangerous on the feet. Now, there's another big area this fight could be contested, or should most likely will be contested, will be on the ground in the grappling department. Holland is very slick on the mat. He's a capable submission fighter. He's got good transitions. He can make mistakes. We've seen him make mistakes that have cost him, but he works very hard. He forces his opponents to work very hard, and that has worked in his favor as well. Now, we did see Giles struggle with GM3 on the ground. He also struggled with Krause. He was in trouble in that first round, nearly got submitted, which was certainly concerning. And this is an area against a true middleweight like Holland, who's big, who's long, and presents a lot of problems. This scenario could be very difficult for Giles to overcome. I would think Holland should have success replicating those issues and those struggles that Trevin Giles has had in the past on the mat. And at the very least, even if he can't submit him, push him very hard, wear him down, and make him less effective later in the fight. The reach advantage of Kevin Holland, in addition to his tendency to rely on kicks, combined with the hesitancy of Trevin Giles, should give Holland the ability to outwork him and find a lot of success on the feet should the fight be contested there. Maybe like a 50-50 a fight in ground or some percentage or ratio, but both Holland having advantages in both areas. I think Holland continues to show that he's making the better improvements. That aggression we saw against Hernandez comes out, and ultimately my prediction is Kevin Holland to defeat Trevin Giles by submission. Fight number 2 is actually a rematch as the 11-4-2 funky Lando Vannata takes on the 25-10-1 Bobby Green, the Strikeforce veteran, King Bobby Green, if you will. Currently the odds are close. Taking a quick look, Bobby Green, the slight underdog at plus 110. The return around on Lando Vannata, a minus 138 favorite. Now, quickly looking at this matchup, again, this is a rematch, as I previously mentioned. They had fought at UFC 216 back in 2017. It was ruled a split decision draw. Lando lost a point, which ultimately cost him the fight. We had a 28-28 scorecard, and we had two 29-27s, one either way. Now, both fighters have struggled. They have a lot of potential and a lot of talent, but they have struggled, and it would kind of become reclamation projects to see who can get back in the win. Almost similar to the Trevin Giles-Kevin Holland fight we just talked about, who can get back in the win column more consistently. Vannata was in a 1-3-2 stretch, which included the draw in this fight. He has now won 2 of his last 3. He's coming off a pretty solid win over against Yancy Medeiros. For Bobby Green, he went through an even more difficult time with 1 win, 5 losses, and the aforementioned draw. There were some questionable decisions in that stretch, but he's coming off a win over veteran Clay Guida. Physically, Green 1 inch taller. They have the same reach. Lando is the younger fighter by 6 years. Now, in their first fight, statistically, Vannata got the slight edge, 104 strikes to 93 overall. He also landed 4 of his 5 takedown attempts. For Bobby Green, just 1 of 3 attempts. Now, looking at the round-by-round comparisons, Vannata came out of the first round outstriking him 31-23. Each man landed a takedown. Green edged him out 32-29 in round 2. 2 takedowns for Vannata in that round. And then finally, Lando in the final round, 44-38, and also landing a takedown. So to me, that would look like a clear 29-28 at the best in favor of Lando Vannata. But let's break down the fight a little bit more succinctly. Lando came out very effectively, cutting off the cage very early on in that matchup, pressing forward, landing some hard low kicks, and just looking like the aggressor. He hurt Green with some combination striking, had him in a lot of trouble, beating him up on the ground, and then bonehead move. He knew right away what he had done wrong. He landed an illegal knee, and a point was taken. He did attempt a guillotine later in that round, had Green in some serious trouble. Green was able to survive, and overall, he landed a late takedown as well, was landing some nice low kicks. I thought Lando won that opening round 10-8. Ultimately, he was given a 10-9 and then a 9-9 with the point taken off. Now, in round 2, Green started to use a jab left hook, started to bust Lando up a little bit, had some success. Lando was wearing that damage on his face pretty evidently. Green was leaning on him in the cage, having some successes, controlling him there as well, landing some body shots and kind of shoulder pressure and then shots to the midsection and taking advantage of his ability to control him. Now, Lando was slowing down in this round. He came out pretty, not very aggressive. And he was still finding the edge in the grappling, and he started to rally at the end of round 2 and possibly, and we saw on one judge's scorecard, stole the round. And you have to go back to round 1 on not one but 2 occasions. First with the knockdown and then with the attempted guillotine. Lando nearly finished the fight, and he went for it. And sometimes when a fighter has an opportunity to get an opponent out of there, they go for it, they push hard, they don't get it. It's very difficult to turn around from that. And there's a very strong indication that Lando Vannata suffered from that in that fight, in the sense that he didn't, get the finish, had a bit of a drop-off, and it took him all the way to the end of the second round before he started putting combinations back together and got his win back and started, finding success. And then as the third round opens up, Lando comes out more aggressively. He's landing. He's more varied with his volume and with his striking and with his volume. He's going to the body. He's mixing in kicks. He scores a late takedown. I honestly thought, I had Bobby Green to win that fight, but I honestly thought Lando Vannata should have won that matchup with a 10-8 in the opening round, which would have been 9-8. I think he would have got the nod. If he doesn't go for the finish twice, he probably doesn't tire himself out in round 2 and lose that round on the scorecards for some of the judges. So there are certainly some, again, we said, it's the benefits of being a dangerous fighter, but the drawbacks of not having the win to push, not quite get the finish, and continue pushing forward. Bobby Green's coming off a nice win over Clay Guida, but Guida's also one of those fighters who's definitely past his prime and doesn't pose a ton of threats to guys who can avoid his grappling and his wrestling. For Lando Vannata, he defeated Yancy Medeiros, which is I think is a tougher opponent at this point than Clay Guida. And I would say Lando appears to have made some adjustments or just improved a little bit more than what Green's remained a little bit stagnant from, as we've seen him over the years. In that matchup, overall, Lando simply did more against Green. He did more. He was ahead. Without that point taken, he absolutely was ahead. He potentially won anyway, as far as I'm concerned. I think he'll be more consistent with his volume here. He'll take advantage, even though he probably won't get the finish early, or at least the opportunity to finish early. I think that actually benefits him in the long run if this fight goes the 15 minutes. And he's allowed to put that consistent effort together, mixing up those body shots, landing those low kicks, being the more varied fighter, slipping in and out of range, and taking advantage of the fact that Green sometimes tends to be a little bit standoffish and has had issues in close decisions. I think this is Vannata's fight to win. I also think Lando can find success with the grappling, getting some takedowns, having some top time, and really wearing on Bobby Green. Hey, it should be a heck of a fight. Nonetheless, my prediction is Lando Vannata to defeat Bobby Green by decision. Moving right along, we're in the UFC's welterweight division as the 12-3 Rude Boy Randy Brown takes on one of my favorite active fighters, the 18-7-1 silent assassin Vicente Luque, in a very fun and always entertaining matchup for both of these guys. This should be a heck of a lot of fun as these two square off. Currently, Vicente Luque at minus 188. He is the favorite, plus 162 for Randy Brown as the underdog. Now, Vicente Luque is coming off a victory over Nico Price, which was a rematch. He took it by TKO in a very entertaining matchup. It was a nice rebound victory from his loss against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson that kind of prevented him from taking that next step into contendership. He has won 7 of 8, 11 of 13, 10 of those by stoppage. Super impressive run for the Brazilian. Now, for Randy Brown, he picked up an upset victory over Warley Alves in Brazil, submitting him no less. He also scored a TKO victory over Brian Barberina, and he is 6-3 in the UFC with 4 finishes as well, so also coming in with a very solid record. Physically, Brown 4 inches taller than Luque, have a 3-inch reach advantage. Luque, surprisingly though, is the younger fighter by a year. Now, when this fight was first announced, I had to double check. I'm like, have these two not fought already? And the reason I thought that is they actually have a lot of common opponents. They have 4 common opponents in recent action. They've both fought Nico Price, and Luque's fought him twice. Brian Barberina, Bilal Muhammad, and way back in the day, they fought Graves. His name's escaping me at the moment. His first name. It doesn't matter. He's the guy that got cut from the UFC for having some issues. Now Brown against common opponents 1-3 in those fights, so not an overly strong record for Luque. He's 4-1, much better. So MMA math would suggest that Luque's got this in the bag. Let's move on, but obviously we don't do that. Luque's also faced better competition if you want to go deeper down that rabbit hole, facing Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who beat him, and Leon Edwards, who also beat him in a fight I think that Luque got again. He'd have a pretty solid chance to hold his own. And then when you look at the fact that the guys that have beaten Brown, Luque's actually beaten them, so it gives him an edge in overall competition. All of that being said, Vicente Luque's been through some absolute wars of late. You look at some of his recent fights; they're super entertaining, but they're very demanding, and they take a toll on a fighter. You know, Nico Price, that last matchup, there was a lot of damage gone both ways. The split decision against Mike Perry was unbelievable. The battle with Brian Barberena was crazy. Even the Stephen Thompson fight was exceptionally damaging to Vicente Luque, and you have to wonder, at some point, is that going to catch up to him? It certainly will. Is it now? How far away are we from that? Does he change his style before it gets to that point? I don't think so, but we don't know. And Randy Brown can absolutely crack. He can throw heavy bombs. He throws good, long punches, and you have to wonder if he can pair them together like he's shown in the past. Could he get a guy like Vicente Luque out of there? Now, we saw Brown come off a pretty good performance against Brian Barberena. It was one of those fights where he went deep into a demanding fight and ultimately pulled it out. His volume was decent. His power was there. He was pretty active. At the same time, Barberena could have honestly been ahead going into the third round, or at the very least was in that fight, and it could have been a close matchup had we not seen a finish. That finish ultimately came with a front kick to the body that hurt Barberena, following some strikes. There was another knee to the body that crumpled him, some follow-up, but it was kind of academic at that point. So very good performance from Brown overall. We did see him struggle with some of the low kicks from Bam Bam, which is something Luque does very well, and he could absolutely go towards in this matchup because he saw the success that was had there. We've also seen some issues with Randy Brown having against fighters on the ground. Barberena took him down a couple of times. Worley Alves nearly submitted him early in that fight. And Mickey Gall, all of his success when he fought Randy Brown was primarily on the mat. Now, when you look at Vicente Luque, he's a dangerous grappler, and he certainly could exploit that. He hasn't landed a lot of takedowns, but it's definitely an option he could go towards against Randy Brown and have a lot of success and possibly even finish this fight. Luque, he's tried to become a little more technical since the Thompson fight, or at least going into the Thompson fight, he tried to adjust and he's tried to be, just be more aggressive. Actually, it was the Leon Edwards fight where he kind of wanted to be more aggressive and more forward with his offense, and certainly aggression and violence has been the name of the game for him. He was throwing some really effective low calf kicks against Nico Price, and what I mentioned with Brown struggling with them. So that's a technique I expect to see him pull out here. And if they, Brown is a big, tall man, but his legs aren't overly big, and if Luque starts landing those low kicks, they could really do some damage early on. Now, all that said, Luque tends to get drawn into brawls, even if he knows it's not the best approach. He throws variety, power, and volume, and he's durable, but remember what I said before, that could catch up with him, and Brown's that type of guy where if he hits you, it could change the course of your career. A brutal knockout loss could really, be the beginning of the end for Vicente Luque in this matchup. Now, that all being said, you look at Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, it took him 138 significant strikes to beat Luque. Leon Edwards needed 3 consecutive takedowns to control Luque on the mat. Even the guys that weren't able to beat Vicente Luque to remain competitive, they had to put together Herculean efforts. Nico Price, 129 significant strikes. Barberena, 169 significant strikes. Perry was the lowest at 87 in that split decision loss. But you see what I'm saying? It takes a lot to get Vicente Luque out of there, or at least to compete with him. And, Randy Brown, he put up a solid effort against Brian Barberena, 90 significant strikes in that matchup, but nothing close prior to that. And that tells me he might be able to put those numbers up, but it's less likely that he will, and more likely Vicente Luque will score those big numbers. Brown was knocked out in weird fashion by Nico Price off his back, which makes you wonder how durable he will be and how vulnerable he will be to the power of Luque in this matchup. I think unless Randy can hurt him and or get the finish early, I just think he can offer. I don't think he can offer enough volume or the takedowns, maybe even the two in conjunction, to win this fight. I think it'll be entertaining as hell. I think Luque's going to throw that volume and that power at him. Look for those low kicks, reduce his mobility, possibly work in the grappling as well. Brown is super tough, but this is a multifaceted opponent and a sizable step up from anybody he's faced. And my prediction is Vicente Luque to defeat Randy Brown by TKO. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the women's flyweight division as The 14-4-0 JoJo Calderwood takes on the 17-6-1 former Invicta champion Jennifer Maia. Currently, JoJo comes in as the slight 163 favorite, plus 137 for the Brazilian Maia as the underdog. Now, this was originally set to feature Maia taking on Vivia Araujo, but Araujo was pulled out of this fight, unfortunately, and Calderwood stepping in with roughly less than 2 weeks' notice when I looked into it, and it's very odd that she's doing this because she was actually in line to fight Valentina Shevchenko for the title. Shevchenko unable to compete at their last event, I believe, or when it was supposed to go down. Either way, the fight was scrapped, and Calderwood's still in line for a title shot, but now she's stepping in to take this fight, and it's very risky, and we'll talk about that. Now, JoJo comes into this having won 3 of 4. She beat Andrea Lee by split decision. She lost to the only girl she's lost to in this division was Katlyn Chookagian, who just fought for the title. She's 4-1 overall in the UFC at flyweight. If you go all the way back and see that she defeated Valerie Letourneau in a flyweight fight, before the flyweights actually had a division. For Maia, she's the former Invicta champion. She had 6 wins coming into the UFC, and she lost to Liz Carmouche in her debut, a title challenger. She beat Alexis Davis and Roxanne Modafferi, but also lost to Chookagian in more recent action. Physically, Calderwood 2 inches taller. She'll have a 1-inch reach advantage. She is 3 years older than Maia. Now, you have to ask yourself, what is Calderwood thinking? She has a title shot secured. No one's taken it away from her, as far as I know. She waits a little bit longer. She gets an opportunity to fight Shevchenko. She moves on. Obviously, she's not willing to wait that distance. She's putting it on the line. You look what happened with Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, and then Khabib Nurmagomedov. Not exactly the same scenario, but you see what I'm driving at there. Ferguson fought Gaethje when Khabib was out. He could have honestly said, "No, I'm not. I'm waiting for this opportunity to fight for the title," but he lost, and there's a lot of history there, so he could still get an opportunity. But if JoJo loses this matchup, I think she's out of commission. She's gonna have to put together a nice little run to get herself back in contention. I think that's a lot of risk here and very limited reward. Now for Maia, conversely, huge opportunity. 2-2 in the UFC, but if she wins here, could she be the next contender? I don't know. I'm not necessarily sure. But hey, we're looking for people to step up and fight the champion, and maybe she fits the bill if she wins this matchup. Now, Maia's a Shootbox Academy graduate, or at least competitor, a very aggressive striker. That being said, she has just 3 wins by knockout, and she's gone the distance in 8 straight fights, but you see that style replicated and emulated in the cage. Against Roxanne Modafferi, she was able to bully her around with just her physicality and general power. Had similar success against Alexis Davis. Not so much against Katlyn Chookagian, who basically took her power and said, that's fine, I'm going to be elusive, I'm going to be fast, I'm going to be more active, and it worked for her. And that's what ultimately cost Maia her ability to contend immediately out of the gates. Now, Maia had a lot of issues with the distance of Chookagian in that fight. Couldn't reach her. In fact, if you look at the stats, she threw 231 significant strikes, landed 58. That's 25%. That's not good. That's a lot of swinging and missing. That's very difficult to maintain and have any success with if you're putting up those type of numbers. She did land some decent leg kicks throughout that matchup, but she missed with her hands so much, and she was getting hit and chasing her opponent constantly. It wasn't a good look, and she lost the decision. So, by comparison, when Calderwood fought Chookagian, she actually landed more strikes than Katlyn. She landed 112 significant strikes to Katlyn's 82, which was 42% accuracy, which is pretty solid. And she landed 69 leg kicks, which, again, Calderwood with that Muay Thai background, she's going to come out and throw those, but it was a very effective weapon. JoJo's very dangerous. She might not possess, that big one-strike punching power, but at the same time, her technique is so good, and she's able to time things so effectively, she can put you down with one big shot, and we've seen her do it in the past. And she throws with more variety than Maia, which is worth noting as well. She's actually landed 100 significant strikes in 3 of her 5 Flywood matchups. She landed 85 against Lipski in her only fight to go deep that didn't go over 100. And against Farias, she submitted her early on, so that fight didn't get out of the first round, so her striking totals weren't that elevated. But it showed her move. She was draining a lot to get in at 115, so fighting at 125 certainly has helped her, and her volume is there. Now, that being said, I think we have to understand that there is potential here that we're going to see JoJo look for takedowns in this matchup. Maia has struggled and put on her back. Liz Carmouche found a lot of success putting her on her back. Alexis Davis went around with putting her on her back. And JoJo Calderwood is 5-1 in the UFC when she lands takedowns in a fight. 5-1, that's damn impressive. Conversely, she's 1-3 when she's landed 0 takedowns, and that one win was when she won by submission, so she still won on the ground. And she's showing, despite her notoriety as a striker, she absolutely is becoming a more diversified fighter. And she's improving and building on her offense. If she, before she gets taken, she's also nasty in the clinch. But I think that's an area where Maia is able to use some, her physical strength and maybe bully JoJo around a little bit. I wouldn't want to hang out in the clinch with either girl, but I think that's a less than great scenario for Calderwood, and I think she should go right for the takedowns if she gets that opportunity. Look for Maia to march forward with power, but she's not an economical striker, and that's going to catch up with her. If she can connect, she could do damage, and it could change the pace of the fight. You could back JoJo up, bust her nose. We've seen her get hurt in fights, and that really cost her. And with the late notice factor as well, if she doesn't get off to a good start, it really could start to unravel. And then the thought process, I'm losing my title shot right here. Why did I do this? That all could play a factor here and certainly be concerning. But I think JoJo's tough. I think she's taking this fight recognizing this is a fight she can win and continue to build her case up and keep herself active. I think she's going to land more volume with her distance strikes, using that jab, using those kicks, and catching Maia coming forward as she tries to crash forward and really close the distance on her. Those takedowns will be a key aspect of her offense as well. Look for Calderwood to land a handful of those. I'd say 2 to 3 throughout the matchup. And my prediction is JoJo Calderwood to defeat Jennifer Maia by decision. And finally, we move to the main event of the evening. For that, we're in the UFC's middleweight division as the undefeated 11-0 Edmen Shahbazyan continues his climb up the ranks as he takes on the 20-7 Derek Brunson. Currently, Shahbazyan, not surprisingly, a fairly sizable minus 334 favorite. The return on Brunson plus 250. Now, as we said, Holly Holm and Aldana out of the main event. This bout gets pushed up to the main card slot, or main event slot, but it is only 3 rounds. It's going to maintain it be a 3-round fight, which certainly I think plays a role, but shockingly not the way I would expect it to, at least the way I see it unfolding. We'll talk about that in a bit. Now, Shahbazyan getting a huge showcase opportunity. The guy's 4-0. We know he's Ronda Rousey's. Ronda Rousey manages him, so that helps him, I think, a little bit with the brass. He's 4-0 in the UFC. Looked impressive. Had a split decision win against Darren Stewart in his debut, and that has got better since. He's finished all of his opponents, most recently knocking out Brad Tavares, so very impressive that way. For Derek Brunson, he was there once. He won 5 straight fights and started his UFC tenure 7-1. And he was one of those guys you're talking about, is he going to get a title shot? Is he the type of guy who's going to work his way into contention? He's close, but now he's gone 4-4 his last 8. Has won back-to-back wins to kind of salvage himself against Elias Theodoro and Ian Heinisch, but he is certainly not the guy we thought he was. And he's kind of become a bit of a gatekeeper. Not the guy. I'd say he's certainly not a contender at this point. There's a lot of guys ahead of him. He'd have to string together a lot of wins starting here, but he's a solid gatekeeper nonetheless. Physically, Shahbazyan 1 inch taller. Brunson held out a 3-inch reach advantage, and Shahbazyan, being so young, 13 years younger than Brunson. Now, as I said, Derek Brunson is 4-4 in his last 8 fights, but let's not overlook who he's lost to. Former champion Robert Whittaker, current champion Israel Adesanya, former champion Anderson Silva, and longtime contender, former Strikeforce champion Jacare Souza. And then if you want to go back to his previous other UFC loss, Yoel Romero. That's a, murderer's row of opponents to lose. If you're going to lose to those type of guys, and again, the Anderson Silva fight was probably bullshit as far as I'm concerned, but nonetheless, that's a good lineup of guys to lose to. That tells you where he's at. Brunson absolutely has power, 11 wins by knockout. His last KO finish, or last finish, knockout finish, came in 2017 against Lyoto Machida, which was on the ground with some vicious ground and pound. And as I said, he has power, but it's kind of a blessing and a curse. If he goes looking for the big knockout and he doesn't get it, he gets himself in trouble. He's defensively vulnerable. He gasses out, and it can just hamper the rest of his performance or lead to him getting finished. We saw him go for it against Robert Whittaker. It didn't happen, and Whittaker went on to win the championship, shortly thereafter, and Brunson, continued to contend, but we just saw what happened in that fight where he went for it, didn't get it, and ultimately really didn't get it when all the cards were on the table. Now, his last 2 fights, he's been more of a conservative fighter, and he's been effective. Volume striking and takedowns has been his approach. He landed 137 strikes and 6 takedowns over his last 2 fights. In order to find that many, strikes and takedowns, you have to go back and combine his last 9 fights to see that Brunson land that many strikes over the same stretches over the last 2 fights, and over his last 11 fights where he's put up that many takedowns. So you see what I'm saying? He kind of gets guys out of there quickly, or he kind of gets finished himself. For Ian Heinisch, his defense looked very good. I love that fight. I was all over Brunson in that matchup. His defense looked good. He was in and out of range. He was avoiding taking damage. He was landing his own with some power, but again, not exposing himself, not opening up too much. He mixed in a few takedowns and takedown attempts to make it varied and keep Heinisch, stuck on the outside questioning what was coming next. Heinisch attempted 9 takedowns. Brunson's takedown defense is fantastic. He was able to negate any further offense that Heinisch attempted to use with his takedowns and really take that aspect out of the matchup. His cardio looked decent as well because he was dictating the pace. He did slow down, he did take some shots, but he did enough to win that fight. Now looking at Edmen Shahbazyan, he has finished 10 of his 11 victories. 9 by knockout, 9 of 10 in the first round. His only fight to go outside of the first round was a split decision win versus Darren Stewart in his debut back in 2018. Grappling heavy, success, tired, held on for the win. I thought Stewart won that matchup. I had Stewart, and nonetheless, it went down as a victory for Shahbazyan. Since that fight, though, he's put on a showcase. He finished Bird with elbow strikes. He took out Marshman with ground and pound and eventually rear naked choke with a victory. And then he had a slightly longer fight against Brad Tavares, who's another one of those guys who's just a step down below Brunson. He showed an active jab, flashing out there and doubling and tripling it up, and then boom, coming with big power in that right hand, dropped Tavares, had him in all kinds of trouble, and finished him with a head kick. Now you look at all that and you go, damn impressive, off to a great start. Young guy, talented, having a lot of success. The UFC's kind of seems to be pushing him a little bit. Main event already, great. But you start to realize he's exploited his opponent's weaknesses. He landed 8 takedowns against Stewart, a guy who struggled on the ground. He submitted Jack Marshman, another guy who's been vulnerable on the mat. He knocked out Bird and Tavares, who've each been knocked out 3 times, and we know they have some chin issues. So it's not like he's been beating top-level competition, but he has been beating and finishing guys that if you're going to be the next big thing, if you're going to be the next big contender, you got to. And he's been doing it emphatically, which is huge. Is Brunson the next step on the ladder, or is he a bit of a stumbling block that lets him go back and recalibrate? I don't know. Brunson's been knocked out 5 times. So Shahbazyan knocks him out. He kind of falls into that category of guys who are prone to getting finished, even more so than the guys he has finished. He's been knocked out 4 times in round 1. Jacare got him twice, Israel Adesanya, and Whitaker. That's some impressive company. Now, the question is, can the Brunson 2.0, the new Brunson we're looking at, stretch Shahbazyan out into a fight where he starts to fade? Can he? And Brunson doesn't have the world's best cardio, but that could be a weapon for him in this fight. And that's why I said before, if this was a 5-round matchup, I look at it and go, Brunson maybe survive the first round, start to turn things in round 2, and then take over rounds 3, 4, and 5 if Shahbazyan starts to fade. That's absolutely his opportunity to do so. But I really like what I saw with Shahbazyan against Brad Tavares, using that sharp jab and pressuring him, but not really opening himself up. I think it's going to be hard for Brunson to avoid that type of power and speed over the duration of 3 rounds. Brunson could land some takedowns and take Edmen's striking out of the equation, tire him out, make him less effective in rounds 2 and 3, and that certainly is an avenue to victory that he has, and that's something I looked at heavily as a possibility. Over 5 rounds, it could have been interesting, as I said, to see how this fight plays out, but I don't know. We don't have that luxury for this fight. Brunson, I think he might go for it early. This might be a fight where he comes in and is like, heck, this is my main event, up-and-coming fighter, opportunity to put my name back in the map, get myself some other big fights. Let's get him out of there quickly. Let's take it to him as he's taken it to other guys. But I think that will prove problematic, especially if he can't get that early finish. I think the sharp striking and aggression and just that ignorance of youth where Shahbazyan's like, I don't care. I'm undefeated. I'm confident. I'll step in there. I will swing with this guy. I will put him down. I know he's struggled. We saw Adesanya put him down as well. I think Shahbazyan, maybe not as diversified as Adesanya, but just that confidence and that willingness to step in there and trade and to know, hey, look, I can finish this guy. He's been finished on multiple occasions. I've never been finished before. I think that fares well for Edmen Shahbazyan. And I think he, watch for the elbows if Brunson goes for any prolonged takedown attempts along the cage. We can start seeing Shahbazyan dropping from there. But I think eventually catch them with a combination. And my prediction is Edmen Shahbazyan to defeat Derek Brunson by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 173. As per usual, all of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. You can also check out the bet packs there, just $15 to get my betting insight for this entire fight. I also look at fantasy breakdowns for DraftKings as well. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions if you want to follow along. I do my best to post. I didn't do a lot of tweeting in the last event, but I will certainly for this card. And as you guys have been made well aware, this appears to be my final show. Again, I'm not ruling out any potential return to do major events, but in this capacity, after 10 years to the day of breaking down every single UFC event, mixing in some Strikeforce, the odd Bellator, it's time for me to take a bit of a break and, you know, maybe walk away for good, but at the very least take some time away. This was meant nothing. This is just a hobby. I have I'm a school teacher. I'm a high school teacher. I've got a solid career. This is just a hobby I do on the side. I've got a young family as well, all kinds of things going on. So I think it's an appropriate time to take a bit of a break, let some of the other people continue to do so, continue to break the fights down and just be the, you know, again, I'm a small fish in a very large pond. There's a lot of good guys out there who do a lot better job than I do breaking fights down, a lot more knowledgeable, and just their formats are fantastic, so please check them out. And again, guys, I always appreciate your support over the years. It's been fantastic. People who watched me since the beginning, people who watched me then don't watch me anymore, people who started watching me halfway through. Maybe this is your first show. Nonetheless, I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And take care, guys.